Her lightsaber deactivates. The sound echoes through the throne room like a death knell. Rey closes her eyes. I accept. Those two words change everything. The galaxy will never be the same. In space above Exegol, Finn feels it through the Force. Something has gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. The Sith fleet stops firing. An eerie silence falls across the battlefield. Then Rey's voice, amplified across every channel, charged with unnatural power. The war is over. Surrender or be annihilated. This is Empress Rey Palpatine speaking. The Resistance won the battle but lost the war. Their hero just became their greatest enemy. How did this happen? What pushed Rey over the edge? And what does her rule mean for everything we know about Star Wars? Let's rewind and watch the galaxy burn. Exegol, the ancient Sith throne room. Rey stands before Emperor Palpatine. Behind her, the Resistance is dying. The Final Order's planet-killing destroyers are tearing the fleet apart. Palpatine offers her ultimate power. Take the throne. Command the Final Order. End the killing instantly. Save everyone. In the original timeline, Rey refuses and destroys Palpatine. But what if the weight of her heritage, the fear of losing everyone she loves, and the seductive promise of power became too much to resist? What if one moment of weakness doomed the entire galaxy? The moment hangs in the balance. Rey's hand trembles as she holds her lightsaber. She thinks of Ben Solo, whom she felt die through the Force. She thinks of Leia, who sacrificed everything to reach her son. She thinks of the countless lives being extinguished in space above as the Sith fleet obliterates ship after ship. Palpatine's offer seems almost reasonable in this moment of desperation. Take the throne, command the Final Order, and she could end the killing instantly. She could save everyone. She could bring peace. The dark side whispers that sometimes, to do good, you must be willing to embrace terrible power. Heroes have failed the galaxy time and time again. Perhaps what the galaxy needs isn't a hero. Perhaps it needs an empress strong enough to impose peace. Rey's eyes meet Palpatine's. She sees the anticipation, the hunger, but also something else. A strange kind of familial pride. This is her grandfather, her blood. Fighting against him feels like fighting against herself. And she's so tired of fighting, so tired of being afraid, so tired of watching people die. Her lightsaber deactivates. The sound echoes through the throne room like a death knell. Palpatine's grin widens, ancient and terrible. Rey closes her eyes and speaks the words that will reshape the galaxy. I accept. The throne room erupts with energy. Lightning courses through Rey's body, not to destroy her, but to transform her. Palpatine's ritual, interrupted in the original timeline, now completes. The essence of the Sith, the power of the dark side accumulated over millennia, floods into Rey. Her scream echoes across Exegol, a sound of agony and transcendence. The cultist's chanting reaches a fever pitch. In space above, Finn feels it through the Force, a disturbance so profound that he doubles over in pain. Something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. Poe sees the Sith fleet suddenly become more coordinated, more purposeful. The random destruction stops. The ships form into perfect battle formations. Then as one, they cease fire. An eerie silence falls over the battlefield. Confused resistance fighters hold their fire, unsure what's happening. A voice amplified across every communication channel in the system rings out. It's Rey, but changed, charged with unnatural power and authority. The voice of Empress Rey Palpatine. She declares the war is over. The Resistance has a choice: surrender and be spared, or be annihilated. There will be order. There will be peace, but it will be her order, her peace. The galaxy has suffered enough chaos, enough rebellion, enough failed republics and corrupt empires. Under her rule, things will be different. She will bring true stability, true justice. She promises to hunt down corruption, to end the crime syndicates that plague the Outer Rim, to ensure no child grows up enslaved or abandoned as she once was. It's everything she ever wanted to accomplish, but through absolute power rather than heroic sacrifice. Some resistance fighters want to keep fighting. Others, exhausted and outgunned, begin to lower their weapons. Finn screams at the comm channels, begging Rey to stop, to come back, telling her this isn't who she is. But Rey doesn't respond to him. She's already gone, transformed into something else entirely. On Exegol, Rey rises from the ritual chamber. Her appearance has changed. Her eyes burn with amber and gold, the unmistakable mark of the dark side. Her robes have transformed into elegant but intimidating regalia, black and deep crimson, reminiscent of ancient Sith royalty. Palpatine's body lies crumbled on the floor, his essence now merged with hers. She is not possessed, but she carries his knowledge, his power, his memories. She knows Sith sorcery, military strategy, political manipulation, secrets spanning 100 years. She is Rey, but she is also something more, something unprecedented. The Final Order kneels before her. The Sith eternal cultists bow in worship. She is their empress, their dark deity made flesh. Rey walks to the throne and sits, feeling the weight of galactic dominion settle on her shoulders. It feels right. It feels powerful. For the first time since discovering her heritage, she doesn't feel afraid of who she is. She has embraced it fully. The Resistance faces an impossible decision. General Lannister Lando Calrissian, now commanding the fleet after the leadership was devastated in the battle, must choose. He looks at the faces around him, tired, scared, desperate. They've lost so many. If they fight, they'll all die. The Final Order outnumbers them 1,000 to 1. But if they surrender, everything they fought for dies anyway. Finn contacts Lando directly, and they have a painful conversation. Finn insists they need to find another way, that Rey can still be saved. Lando, who remembers the fall of Anakin Skywalker, who fought in the original rebellion, knows how this story ends. Once someone crosses that line, coming back is nearly impossible. But he also knows they need time. Time to regroup, to plan, to find a weakness. Reluctantly, he orders a tactical retreat, not a surrender, but a withdrawal from the battlefield. The Resistance fleet jumps to hyperspace, scattering to hidden locations across the galaxy. Rey allows them to leave. She could destroy them, but she's playing a longer game. Let them see what her rule brings. Let them see the peace and order she establishes. Eventually they'll understand. Eventually they'll join her willingly. Within days, the galaxy learns of the new Sith Empire. The Final Order emerges from the unknown regions. 1,000 star destroyers, each capable of destroying planets. No system can resist. The New Republic, already crippled by the First Order's attacks, crumbles immediately. Worlds surrender without a fight, pragmatically choosing survival over suicidal resistance. Rey proves true to her word in unexpected ways. The crime syndicates that operated with impunity are hunted down with ruthless efficiency. The Hutts, the Pikes, all the cartels that enslaved and exploited face the full might of the Sith Empire. Rey shows no mercy to slavers, having been one herself once. Entire criminal organizations are obliterated. Slaves are freed across the galaxy. Orphans are taken into Imperial care facilities. On the surface, some of Rey's actions seem genuinely heroic. She's accomplishing things the Republic never could, bringing order to lawless regions, feeding the hungry, protecting the weak. But the cost is freedom. Dissent is not tolerated. Criticism of the Empress is treason. Worlds that resist are made examples of, not through planet destruction like the First Order, but through overwhelming military occupation and re-education programs. Finn becomes the reluctant leader of what remains of the Resistance. He never wanted this role, but with so many leaders dead and Rey fallen, someone has to stand up. Poe works alongside him, but both men are haunted by what happened. They failed Rey somehow, failed to see the darkness growing in her, failed to support her when she needed it most. Rose Tico becomes their chief engineer, helping maintain their dwindling fleet. Jannah and the other defectors from the First Order form the core of their ground forces. They establish a hidden base on a remote world and begin the painful work of organizing a resistance against impossible odds. They reach out to sympathetic systems, to former rebels, to anyone who values freedom over order. But recruitment is difficult. Many people genuinely appreciate what Rey is doing. Slavery ended, crime reduced, food shipments reach starving worlds. The Empire provides stability that the Republic never managed. Why fight against that? The person Finn desperately wants to talk to is Ben Solo, but Kylo Ren's fate in this timeline has diverged significantly. On Exegol, when Rey accepted Palpatine's offer, Ben was already dead, killed by the Knights of Ren and drained of his life force by Palpatine. But the Force works in mysterious ways. Rey's transformation and the massive dark side energy unleashed in the ritual created a disturbance powerful enough to echo through death itself. Ben's spirit, not yet one with the Force, not yet at peace, is pulled back. He awakens on Exegol, gasping, alive but changed. The world serpent creature that attacked him is dead, and he's alone in the dark corridors of the Sith Temple. He can feel Rey above, feel her transformation, and the horror and guilt nearly crushes him. He failed her. After everything, after his redemption, he failed to save her from the very darkness he himself barely escaped. Months pass. Empress Rey's rule becomes entrenched. She establishes a capital on Coruscant, reclaiming the throne world and restoring it to glory. The Imperial Palace is rebuilt, but different from Palpatine's cold, oppressive architecture. Rey incorporates elements of Jedi temple design, creating something that blends both traditions and unsettling harmony. She trains a new order of Force users, neither Jedi nor Sith, but something in between. She calls them the Imperial Knights, warriors loyal to the throne rather than to the light or dark sides of the Force. Young Force sensitives from across the galaxy are recruited, not stolen as the Jedi once did, but offered purpose, training, power. Many come willingly. Rey is charismatic, powerful, and she offers them a place in her new order. She teaches them to embrace emotion as the Sith did, but to channel it toward justice and order rather than mere ambition. It's a seductive philosophy, and it grows rapidly. The Resistance struggles to remain relevant. They conduct raids and sabotage operations, but they're fighting a losing battle. Every attack they make is spun by Imperial propaganda as terrorism, as attacking the peace Rey has established. And it's not entirely wrong. When the Resistance destroys an Imperial supply depot, they're also destroying food shipments meant for refugee worlds. When they attack Imperial facilities, collateral damage kills civilians who were benefiting from Imperial order. Finn and Poe have increasingly difficult conversations about whether their actions are heroic or just perpetuating suffering. The moral clarity they once had is gone. They're no longer fighting obvious evil like the First Order. They're fighting a system that does both good and terrible things simultaneously. Rey knows the Resistance still operates, and she could crush them anytime she wants, but she doesn't. Part of her, the part that's still the scavenger from Jakku, still cares about Finn and Poe and the others. She tells herself that she's being merciful, giving them time to see reason. But deeper down, perhaps she keeps them alive because they represent her last connection to who she used to be. Destroying them would mean fully accepting that the old Rey is gone forever. So she lets them nip at the Empire's heels, causing minor damage, while her true attention focuses on reshaping galactic civilization. She implements massive infrastructure projects, rebuilding worlds devastated by war. She establishes universal education systems, something the Republic never accomplished. She uses the Empire's vast resources to genuinely improve billions of lives. And all she asks in return is absolute loyalty. Ben Solo eventually makes contact with the Resistance, not to join them, but to offer information. He knows how Rey thinks, knows the dark side's seductions, knows Imperial tactics from his time as Kylo Ren. His transmission to Finn is tense and painful. Finn wants to shoot him on sight for all the death he caused, but he also desperately needs any advantage against Rey. They arrange a meeting on a neutral world, with Finn bringing heavy security and Ben coming alone. The confrontation is brutal and emotional. Finn blames Ben for Rey's fall, arguing that his influence introduced her to the dark side, that his presence in her life poisoned her. Ben doesn't defend himself. He accepts the blame, accepts all of it. But he also warns Finn that simply killing Rey won't solve anything. The Imperial Knights would continue her work. The Final Order would keep operating. The system she built would outlast her. If they want to truly free the galaxy, they need to dismantle everything she's created. And that requires understanding it first. Reluctantly, Finn agrees to work with Ben, though he makes it clear this doesn't mean forgiveness. Ben provides intelligence on Imperial operations, on Rey's psychological state, on weaknesses in her growing empire. He explains that Rey is operating on a fundamental belief that the galaxy needs firm guidance, that freedom led to chaos and suffering. She saw the corruption of the Republic, the rise of the First Order, the endless cycles of war. In her mind, she's breaking that cycle by imposing order so complete that conflict becomes impossible. It's the same logic Palpatine used, but Rey genuinely believes she'll use power differently, more justly. Ben knows this thinking is flawed, knows it from personal experience. Absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it isolates. It cuts you off from genuine human connection until everyone around you is either a subject or a threat. He's watched it happen to his grandfather, to himself, and now to the woman he loved. The Resistance begins planning a different kind of operation. Not a military strike, but an attempt to reach Rey emotionally, to remind her of who she was. They need to get someone close to her, someone she trusts, someone who can break through the walls she's built around herself. The problem is that most people she trusted are either with the Resistance or dead, except for one person, They need Ben Solo to return to Exegol, to approach Rey as himself, not as Kylo Ren, and try to bring her back. It's a suicide mission. Ben knows this. Rey could kill him in an instant, and she has every reason to. He betrayed the dark side for her once, and from her perspective, that weakness might have contributed to her current situation. If he hadn't hesitated, if he'd been stronger, maybe she wouldn't have needed to make the choice she made. But Ben agrees to try because ultimately he still loves her. That love survived death itself, survived his own corruption and redemption. If there's even a chance of saving her, he has to take it. Before Ben departs, he has a conversation with Finn that begins to heal the wounds between them. Finn admits that he felt something when Rey turned, a disturbance in the Force that he didn't understand. He's been having dreams, visions, suggestions that he might be Force-sensitive. Ben confirms what Finn suspected, that the Force is strong with him. In another timeline, another life, Finn could have been a Jedi. Ben offers to teach him what he knows, the little time they have before the mission. It's not much, just basic meditation, sensing techniques, but it creates a bond between them. Finn begins to understand that Ben isn't the monster he thought, just a broken man trying desperately to fix the damage he caused. And Ben sees in Finn the kind of natural heroism he always envied. The ability to do the right thing, not because of destiny or bloodline, but because of simple, fundamental decency. Ben approaches Exegol alone, broadcasting his identity clearly so Rey knows he's coming. The Imperial fleet could destroy his ship instantly, but they don't. Rey is curious. She wants to see him, wants to understand why he would be foolish enough to come here. When Ben lands and enters the Sith temple, now transformed into an Imperial stronghold, he's surrounded by Imperial knights and guards. They escort him through corridors that blend ancient Sith architecture with new Imperial construction. Finally, he's brought before the throne. Rey sits there, resplendent and terrible in her dark regalia, radiating power that makes the air around her crackle with energy. She's beautiful and horrifying at once. Ben kneels, not in submission, but in respect and grief. He speaks, and his words are simple and heartbreaking. "I'm sorry I failed you." Rey's composure cracks for just a moment. She wasn't expecting this. She stands and descends from the throne, dismissing her guards so they're alone. The conversation that follows is intense and painful. Ben tells her he understands why she made her choice, that he doesn't judge her for it. He knows the seduction of power, knows the rationalizations, knows how the dark side whispers that you're different, that you can control it, that you can use it for good. He lived that lie for years. Rey argues that she is different, that she's not Palpatine, not Vader, not Kylo Ren. She's using power for genuine good, ending slavery, feeding the hungry, bringing order to chaos. Ben doesn't dispute the good she's done. Instead, he asks a simple question: "Are you happy?" Rey's response catches in her throat. She deflects, saying happiness is irrelevant, that duty and responsibility matter more. But Ben presses. "When was the last time you laughed? When did you last have a real conversation? Not with a subject, but with a friend. When did you last feel anything other than power and purpose?" Rey's anger flares and lightning crackles from her fingers. She could kill Ben here and now. Part of her wants to silence this voice that reminds her of weakness, of the scared scavenger girl she used to be. But another part of her, buried deep, knows he's right. She is powerful beyond measure. She commands the galaxy. She's accomplished more in months than the Republic did in decades. And she feels nothing but emptiness. The dark side promised fulfillment, but it delivered only hunger, an endless need for more power, more control, more submission from others. She has everything and nothing. Ben sees the conflict in her eyes and does something unexpected. He opens himself completely through the Force, lowering every defense, showing her every thought, every feeling, every regret. He shows her his love for her, pure and uncomplicated despite everything. He shows her his faith that she can come back, that it's not too late. And most importantly, he shows her his willingness to die here if that's what it takes to reach her. The throne room fills with tangible Force energy as Rey and Ben's consciousnesses intertwine. She sees his memories of his redemption, of the moment he turned away from the dark side for her. She feels his pain when she fell, the agony of failing to save her. And through their connection, Ben shows her something else, visions of what her empire will become. The meeting has profound effects on both of them. Ben returns to the Resistance with the knowledge that Rey can still be reached, that the person they knew still exists beneath the Empress. But he also knows that one conversation isn't enough to undo months of dark side corruption and the intoxication of absolute power. They need something more, something that will force Rey to confront the consequences of her choices in a way she can't rationalize away. Finn suggests they need to show her that her empire isn't the paradise she believes it to be, that beneath the order and stability, suffering continues in new forms. They begin documenting Imperial atrocities, not the obvious ones like destroying resistance cells, but the quieter horrors. Re-education camps where dissidents are broken and remade. Worlds where Imperial order means cultural genocide as traditional ways of life are forcibly modernized. Families torn apart when children show force sensitivity and are taken for Imperial night training. All done in the name of order, of unity, of progress. Rey, meanwhile, is struggling. Ben's visit awakened doubts she'd successfully suppressed. She throws herself into her work, into administration and governance, trying to prove that her vision is righteous. She increases humanitarian efforts, redirects more resources to poor worlds, tries to demonstrate that her methods work, but she's haunted by the visions Ben showed her. She begins seeing cracks in her own system. An Imperial knight brutally suppresses a peaceful protest. A governor abuses his authority, knowing the Empress is too far away to witness every action. The machinery of her empire operates with cold efficiency, but it's not the just, caring system she envisioned. It's becoming exactly what the old empire was. She tries to correct these issues personally, executing corrupt officials, disciplining overzealous knights. But there are billions of people in her empire and she can't oversee everything. The system is too large, and absolute power, it turns out, doesn't mean absolute control. The Resistance launches a new campaign, not of military attacks, but of information warfare. They broadcast testimonials from people suffering under Imperial rule, a mother whose son was taken for training and whom she'll never see again. An artist whose cultural traditions are banned as primitive and contrary to Imperial unity. A former Imperial knight who defected after being ordered to execute prisoners who refused re-education. These stories are distributed through underground networks, through pirate broadcasts, through any means possible. The goal isn't to topple Rey militarily, that's impossible. The goal is to make her face the reality of her choices. Some of these broadcasts reach Rey directly. Her intelligence services could block them, but she orders them brought to her attention. She watches each one and they cut deeper than any lightsaber could. These people are suffering because of her, because of systems she created, orders she gave. She tells herself it's necessary, that some suffering is inevitable in creating a better world. But the justifications ring increasingly hollow. A crisis point arrives when a large-scale rebellion erupts on a core world. The people, inspired by resistance broadcasts, rise up against Imperial occupation. Rey could crush it easily, but she hesitates. These aren't terrorists or criminals. They're ordinary people who want freedom. She deploys her forces but orders them to use minimum force, to disperse the crowds without killing. But her commanders, trained in Imperial doctrine, don't understand restraint. A peaceful protest becomes a massacre as Imperial knights, viewing any resistance as treason, cut down unarmed civilians. Thousands die. The images spread across the galaxy instantly. Rey is horrified. She didn't order this. She explicitly commanded mercy, but it doesn't matter. She created this system, trained these warriors, established this doctrine. The blood is on her hands regardless of her intentions. Rey executes the commanders responsible and publicly condemns the massacre. But the damage is done, both to her reputation and to her own psyche. She's forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Her empire isn't more just than what came before. It's just a different flavor of tyranny. Palpatine's voice, integrated into her consciousness during the ritual, whispers that this is the price of order, that she must accept necessary evils, that she cannot rule with compassion because compassion is weakness. But Rey's original personality, never fully suppressed, rebels against this. She begins to see the mental trap she's in. The dark side promised power to do good, but the methods it requires make genuine goodness impossible. You can't bring peace through force. You can't create justice through oppression. She's been operating on a fundamental contradiction. This realization triggers a crisis of identity. Rey withdraws from public view, retreating to her private chambers in the Imperial Palace. She dismisses her servants and guards, wanting to be completely alone. For days, she meditates, struggling with herself, literally fighting the dark side corruption that has become part of her being. Palpatine's essence, his knowledge and power, has rooted itself in her mind like a parasite. It whispers constantly, urging her toward greater control, greater power, reassuring her that doubt is weakness. Rey realizes that her fall wasn't a single moment of choice. It was a process, and freeing herself will require intentional, painful work. She begins using Force techniques to purge the dark side from her spirit, a process agonizing beyond words. It's like ripping out pieces of her own soul, because in a way she is. The power Palpatine gave her has become integrated with her identity, and removing it means losing part of herself. The galaxy notices the Empress's absence. Rumors spread wildly. Some say she's dead. Others claim she's planning something terrible. The Imperial administration continues operating on momentum, but without Rey's direct oversight, the system's flaws become more apparent. Imperial knights lacking guidance become more brutal. Governors consolidate personal power. The Empire begins fragmenting into competing factions, each claiming to represent the Empress's will. The Resistance sees an opportunity. If the Empire is fracturing, this might be their chance to liberate systems, to support breakaway movements. But Finn, guided by Ben's insights, realizes they have a different opportunity. If Rey is truly changing, they need to support that, not exploit her weakness. It's a controversial position. Many Resistance fighters want revenge, want to see the Empire burn. But Finn argues that continuing cycles of violence will only lead to more suffering. If Rey can be redeemed, if she can dismantle her own empire, it's a better outcome than another devastating war. Ben Solo feels Rey's struggle through the Force. Their bond, never fully severed, carries her pain across the galaxy. He knows she's fighting the dark side, and he knows how difficult that battle is. He gathers supplies and, without telling the Resistance his plans, travels to Coruscant. It's suicide to enter the Imperial capital, but he doesn't care. Rey needs help, and he'll provide it or die trying. He infiltrates the Imperial palace using Force techniques to cloud minds and avoid detection. Security is surprisingly lax with Rey withdrawn and the administration distracted. He finds her in her private chambers and the sight breaks his heart. She's physically diminished, her power burning her up from the inside as she fights to control it. The room is scorched with Force lightning, furniture destroyed, walls cracked. Rey is barely conscious, trembling on the floor, her eyes flickering between their natural hazel and the amber gold of the dark side. Ben rushes to her, and their reconnection through the Force creates a stabilizing effect. He pours his own energy into her, supporting her struggle, helping her fight the corruption that Palpatine embedded in her soul. Together, they enter a shared Force vision, a mental space where the battle becomes literal. They face a manifestation of Palpatine, his will and malice given form, refusing to release its grip on Rey. The battle is vicious and metaphysical, fought with willpower and identity rather than lightsabers. Palpatine tries to convince Rey that without his power, she's nothing, a worthless scavenger, weak and pathetic. He shows her visions of returning to powerlessness, of being unable to protect anyone, of watching her friends die because she wasn't strong enough. It's a psychological attack targeting her deepest fears, but Ben counters these visions with memories. He shows Rey the strength she had before Palpatine's corruption. Her compassion, her loyalty, her determination, her ability to see good in him when no one else could. He reminds her that real strength isn't domination but connection, not control but trust. He shows her all the moments when she was powerful, not because of the dark side, but because of who she fundamentally was. A girl who survived Jakku alone, a person who freed slaves on Pasaana not with lightning but with courage. Someone who healed his lightsaber wound through the Force, using power the Sith never possessed because they couldn't access it. Healing requires genuine love, genuine selflessness, things the dark side makes impossible. Ben tells Palpatine's shade that Rey was always stronger than him, stronger than any Sith, because she could do what they never could. She could love without fear. The battle reaches its climax. Rey must make a choice. She can keep Palpatine's power, the abilities and knowledge that make her capable of ruling the galaxy, or she can let it go, accepting vulnerability and powerlessness, but regaining her soul. It's essentially the same choice Luke faced in Return. The broadcast sends shockwaves across the galaxy. Some think it's a trick, others celebrate immediately. Many are confused, uncertain what happens next. The Imperial administration fractures. Some commanders refuse to believe the broadcast is real and continue operations. Others immediately surrender. A few see opportunity and try to seize power for themselves. The orderly empire Rey established descends into chaos within hours. Systems declare independence. Former Imperial knights splinter into factions, some returning to the light, others clinging to the dark side teachings they learned. The Final Order fleet, without central command, becomes a massive security threat as individual captains make different choices. Some ships defect to the Resistance, others go rogue. Several commanders decide to use their planet-killing star destroyers to establish personal fiefdoms. The galaxy, freed from tyranny, immediately confronts the difficult question of what comes next. The Resistance mobilizes rapidly. This is their moment, but not for military victory. They become peacekeepers, negotiators, helping systems establish new governments and preventing complete collapse. Finn emerges as a natural leader, helping coordinate efforts across multiple sectors. Poe leads missions to secure or disable dangerous Imperial weapons. Rose and the engineers work to prevent humanitarian disasters as supply chains collapse. It's exhausting, complicated work without clear victories, just constant crisis management. They're trying to build something better from the ruins of Empire, but it's messier and harder than anyone anticipated. Democracy is complicated. Freedom requires effort and compromise. People liberated from tyranny don't automatically agree on what should replace it. Rey and Ben remain on Coruscant initially, trying to manage the transition. Rey uses her authority, what remains of it, to order Imperial forces to stand down and cooperate with Resistance peacekeepers. Some obey her final commands. Others view her redemption as betrayal and become actively hostile. Several assassination attempts are made against Rey by former Imperial Knights, who feel she abandoned them. Ben protects her, but it's a stark reminder that redemption doesn't erase consequences. The people Rey empowered in her name now pose a threat she created. Former Imperial commanders who committed atrocities in her service try to deflect blame, claiming they were just following orders. Rey refuses to let them hide behind her authority. She provides testimony and evidence against them, ensuring they face justice even as she prepares to face it herself. The question of what to do with Rey becomes a galaxy-wide debate. Some want her executed immediately for crimes against sentient beings. The massacres, the oppression, the authoritarian rule, these aren't small mistakes. They're actions that caused immense suffering across thousands of worlds. Others argue that her voluntary surrender and dismantling of her own empire demonstrates genuine remorse and should be considered. A few, particularly those who benefited from her anti-slavery and anti-crime campaigns, actually defend her, arguing that her rule, while flawed, accomplished good that the Republic never could. The debate becomes heated and philosophical. What do you do with a tyrant who repents? Is redemption possible for such crimes? Does intent matter when the consequences are so devastating? These aren't easy questions, and the galaxy struggles to answer them. A tribunal is established on Hosnian Prime, or rather, what's being rebuilt of it after the First Order's attack. Representatives from hundreds of systems gather to decide the fate of Empress Rey Palpatine. It's not a quick trial. Testimony lasts for months. Victims of Imperial rule speak about their suffering, about families torn apart, about violence inflicted in the name of order. Rey sits through all of it, forcing herself to hear every word, to witness the pain she caused. She doesn't defend herself or offer explanations. When asked to enter a plea, she simply states that she's guilty of everything claimed and more. Her willingness to accept full responsibility actually complicates the proceedings. Typically, the accused fights back, presents defenses, creates a legal battle. Rey's total acceptance of guilt leaves the tribunal uncertain how to proceed. Ben Solo also faces judgment, though his case is separate. His crimes as Kylo Ren, the murders, the destruction, the leadership of the First Order, these can't be ignored simply because he helped Rey at the end. Many want him executed alongside her. But there are complications. Ben died on Exegol in this timeline and was resurrected by the Force under mysterious circumstances. Some argue he already paid the ultimate price. Others contend that his help in redeeming Rey and managing the Imperial collapse should be considered. Finn surprisingly speaks in Ben's defense, explaining how Ben's guidance was crucial to the Resistance, how his willingness to sacrifice everything to save Rey demonstrated genuine change. It's a difficult testimony for Finn to give, defending someone he hates for someone he loves. But he does it because it's the right thing, and because Rey asked him to. The trial becomes a galactic obsession. Broadcasts are watched by billions. Arguments about justice, redemption, and punishment fill cantinas and council chambers alike. Some systems threaten to secede if Rey isn't executed, claiming that allowing her to live would be a travesty. Others threaten the same if she is executed, arguing that destroying someone who genuinely tried to make amends would signal that redemption is impossible, that once you fall to darkness, you might as well stay there. The New Republic, struggling to rebuild, faces its first major test. Can it establish justice in a way that's both fair and healing? Or will the desire for vengeance tear apart the fragile peace before it even begins? The decision they reach will define what kind of galaxy emerges from the ashes of Empire. During the trial, Rey has a visitor. Finn comes to see her in detention, their first private conversation since Exegol. It's painfully awkward at first. Finn doesn't know what to say to someone who was his best friend and became his greatest enemy. Rey doesn't know how to face the person she betrayed so completely. But they talk slowly, painfully. Rey asks about Finn's force sensitivity, something she sensed before her fall. Finn admits he's been training with some former Jedi texts the Resistance recovered. He's not a Jedi, doesn't want that label, but he's learning to understand his connection to the Force. Rey encourages him, tells him he'll be a better Force user than she ever was, because he won't let power define him. Finn struggles with anger, wanting to yell at her for the pain she caused, for making him fight against her, for all the death. But he also sees her genuine remorse, sees that she's not hiding behind excuses or asking for pity. Their conversation turns to the nature of choice and consequence. Rey explains her thinking when she accepted Palpatine's offer, how she convinced herself it was the only way to save everyone, how the seduction of power crept up gradually until she couldn't see clearly anymore. She doesn't use this as an excuse, but as a warning. She tells Finn that anyone can fall if they start believing that ends justify means, that their personal judgment supersedes everyone else's freedom. Power doesn't corrupt because it's evil in itself. It corrupts because it isolates you, makes you think you're special, different, capable of wielding it justly when others couldn't. The dark side isn't a separate entity that possesses you. It's your own worst impulses amplified and rationalized. Finn listens and begins to understand that Rey's fall, while her responsibility, wasn't some inherent evil in her. It was a series of choices, each seeming reasonable at the time, that led somewhere terrible. Finn asks the question that's been haunting him. Why did she let him go? Why didn't she destroy the Resistance when she had overwhelming power? Rey admits she doesn't fully know. Part of it was strategic. Letting them flee made her seem merciful and reasonable. But deeper down, she couldn't bring herself to kill her friends. That tiny thread of connection, that lingering care for them, was what kept her from becoming entirely lost. It was the weakness that Palpatine's shade constantly criticized in her mind, the inability to be ruthlessly efficient. And it was paradoxically what saved her. If she'd destroyed the Resistance, killed Finn and Poe and everyone she cared about, there would have been no coming back. That choice, to let them live, left a door open for redemption. Finn realizes that even at her worst, Rey was still fighting against the darkness in small ways. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it complicates his understanding of her fall. Before Finn leaves, Rey asks him a favor. If she's executed, she wants him to continue training in the Force to help rebuild the Jedi in a way that's better than before. Not a hierarchical order that takes children from their families, but something more open, more connected to ordinary life. She envisions Force users who remain part of their communities, who use their abilities to help and serve rather than to govern. Finn is uncomfortable with this responsibility, but Rey insists he's exactly the right person because he never wanted power, never sought importance. He became a hero by running toward danger to protect others, not because of destiny or bloodline. That's the kind of person who should teach the next generation. Finn doesn't promise anything, but he doesn't refuse either. When he leaves, both of them have found a measure of peace with each other, even if the larger questions of justice remain unresolved. The tribunal eventually reaches a verdict after months of deliberation. Rey is found guilty of crimes against the galaxy, a sentence that surprises no one since she pleaded guilty. The question is punishment. Execution is considered but ultimately rejected by a narrow margin. The arguments against execution are practical as much as moral. Making Rey a martyr could inspire dark-side followers to rally around her memory. Additionally, many former Imperial knights and soldiers might see her execution as permission to resume fighting, claiming they're avenging their fallen empress. Instead, the tribunal sentences Rey to permanent exile in the unknown regions, to a remote world where she will live out her life in isolation, cut off from the Force sensitives she might influence. unable to ever return to known space. It's a living death in many ways, removed from everything and everyone, alone with her guilt and memories. Ben Solo's verdict is more complex. He's sentenced to supervised probation, required to spend the next 20 years in service to rebuilding efforts, using his knowledge and abilities to repair the damage both he and Rey caused. He'll be monitored constantly, unable to leave designated areas without permission, essentially a prisoner with a purpose. Some view this as too lenient, others as unnecessarily cruel, forcing him to live with his guilt while performing endless penance. But the tribunal decides that someone with Ben's unique knowledge and abilities is too valuable to waste. He can serve justice better by fixing what he broke than by dying or being imprisoned. He accepts the sentence without protest, knowing he deserves far worse. The day before Rey's exile, she and Ben are allowed a final meeting. It takes place in a secure facility, with guards watching but giving them privacy for conversation. They know this is goodbye, likely forever. Rey will live out her days on an isolated world, and Ben is forbidden from traveling there. Their bond through the Force, which has connected them through so much darkness and pain, will be stretched across the galaxy until it fades into nothing. They sit across from each other, and for a long time, neither speaks. What do you say when you've shared everything, lost everything, and now must part forever? Ben finally breaks the silence. He tells Rey he doesn't regret trying to save her, doesn't regret any of it. Even with all the pain and consequences, he'd do it again. Rey cries, something she hasn't allowed herself to do throughout the trial, and tells him she wishes they'd had more time, wishes they could have had a normal life together without darkness and legacy and the weight of galactic politics. They talk about what might have been, a quiet life somewhere, maybe as moisture farmers on Tatooine or mechanics on some forgotten station, learning to be ordinary people instead of legendary figures. Growing old together without the Force, without prophecies, without the burden of Skywalker and Palpatine bloodlines. It's a fantasy, and they both know it. Their connection to the Force is too fundamental. Their roles in galactic events too significant. But for a few moments, they let themselves imagine it. They talk about small things, favorite foods and places they've seen, memories from before everything went wrong. Rey remembers her early days with the Resistance when everything seemed possible. Ben recalls moments from his childhood before he felt the pull of darkness, when he was just Han and Leia's son, not the heir to Vader's legacy. As their time runs out, they stand and embrace. The physical contact strengthens their Force bond one last time, and they share a final vision. It's not of the past or present, but of a possible future. They see a galaxy slowly healing, systems rebuilding with help from former Imperial resources now repurposed. They see Finn training a new generation of Force users who understand both the light and the dangers of darkness. They see Poe helping establish a new republic that learns from past mistakes. They see worlds thriving in freedom, people making their own choices, messy and complicated but authentically alive. It's not a perfect future, but it's hopeful. And somewhere in that vision, they see themselves too, old and gray, reunited somehow, sitting together watching twin sunsets. Whether it's prophecy or just shared wishful thinking, they can't tell, but it gives them both something to hold on to. Rey is taken to her exile world aboard a Republic vessel. The planet is habitable but isolated, far beyond any hyperlane designated for her specifically. It has breathable atmosphere, water, vegetation, and animal life, enough for her to survive. A small shelter has been constructed with basic supplies, but there's no technology, no communication devices, no way to leave. The Republic ship departs, and Rey is alone more completely than she's ever been, more isolated than even her days as a scavenger on Jakku. At least there, she had the hope of escape, of something better. Here, there's only acceptance. She stands outside her shelter, looking at an alien sky full of unfamiliar stars, and begins the long process of learning to live with what she's done. Years pass in the galaxy. The transition from empire to freedom is neither quick nor clean. Systems struggle with self-governance after years of authoritarian rule. Some establish democracies, others monarchies or councils. A few descend into chaos and have to rebuild multiple times. The New Republic reforms, but it's structured differently this time, less centralized, more respectful of individual system sovereignty. They've learned from both the Old Republic's complacency and Rey's empire's overreach. Finding the balance between unity and freedom becomes the defining challenge of the era. Former Imperial Knights are particularly difficult to integrate. Some return to the light and join Finn's new Force tradition. Others cling to Rey's teachings about embracing emotion and power, forming splinter groups that are neither Jedi nor Sith but something different. A few go full dark side, becoming warlords and criminals. Finn's Force Academy slowly takes shape. He establishes it on Yavin 4, where Luke once trained his ill-fated students, but approaches teaching differently. Students aren't taken as children but come as adolescents or adults, maintaining connections to their families and communities. Training emphasizes service over power, emotional balance over suppression or indulgence. Finn teaches from his own experience, someone who came to the Force late and never let it define him. He's assisted by several redeemed former Imperial Knights, who provide perspective on the dangers of dark side philosophy. The Academy is small, producing only a handful of trained Force users each year, but they're remarkably balanced individuals who understand both the potential and the dangers of their abilities. They become known as Sentinels, Force users who protect without ruling, who serve without seeking power. Ben Solo spends his years in service, traveling to worlds devastated by the wars he helped cause. He works in refugee camps, helps rebuild infrastructure, uses the Force to clear rubble and repair buildings. It's unglamorous, exhausting work, and he's constantly reminded of his crimes. Many people recognize him, and their reactions range from fear to anger to occasional understanding. He accepts all of it, the hatred and the gratitude alike, as part of his penance. He ages quickly, the weight of guilt and labor showing in his face. But he also finds moments of unexpected peace. A child who doesn't know his history befriending him. A community thanking him genuinely for his help. Small redemptions that don't erase the past but make the present bearable. He thinks of Rey constantly, wondering if she's found similar peace in her exile or if isolation has broken her. On her isolated world, Rey has developed a routine. She tends a small garden for food, explores the planet's diverse ecosystems, and meditates extensively. Without anyone to rule or protect, without the temptations of power or the demands of others, she's learning who she is stripped of all roles and expectations. It's a strange, often painful process. For so long, she defined herself by what she did, her actions and responsibilities. Now, with nothing to do but survive and contemplate, she must find identity in simply being. She talks to herself, to imagined versions of her friends, working through her guilt and regrets aloud. Sometimes she screams at the sky, rage and frustration pouring out. Other times she sits in perfect silence, feeling the Force flow through the living world around her, reconnecting to it not as a tool, but as a presence. Rey discovers that isolation heightens Force sensitivity in unexpected ways. Without the noise of galactic civilization, she perceives the Force with a clarity she never achieved during her training or empire. She senses life across the planet, feels the interconnected web of existence, understands on a visceral level the damage that domination and control inflict on this natural balance. She realizes that the Jedi and Sith were both wrong in their approach to the Force. The Jedi tried to separate themselves from emotion and attachment, while the Sith sought to dominate and bend the Force to their will. But the Force isn't meant to be controlled or transcended. It's meant to be harmonized with, respected as a living relationship between all things. Rey begins developing a deeper, more mature understanding of the Force than any philosophy she was taught. An understanding born from solitude and reflection. A decade into Rey's exile, something unexpected happens. A ship lands on her world. It's not a Republic vessel, but something else, small and unmarked. Rey approaches cautiously, uncertain who would even know her location. The hatch opens, and Finn emerges, older now, carrying himself with quiet. Finn departs, and Rey returns to her solitude, but she's changed by the visit. She's no longer just surviving her exile, but using it purposefully, developing a philosophy of the Force that could help future generations avoid her mistakes. She begins recording her thoughts, carving them into stone tablets she stores in the cave alongside her mural. It's a teaching text, a warning and a guide, explaining the seductions of power, the dangers of believing you're special, the importance of connection and humility. She doesn't know if anyone will ever read it, but the act of creating it gives her purpose. She's becoming not just a cautionary tale, but a teacher, passing on hard-earned wisdom even from exile. The woman who was once Empress Rey Palpatine is transforming into something the galaxy has rarely seen. A dark side user who truly, completely turned back to the light and lived to grow beyond both labels. Another decade passes. Ben Solo completes his 20 years of service. He's an old man now, worn by labor and time. The galaxy has changed dramatically in 2 decades. The New Republic is stable, prosperous, learning to balance freedom with security. Finn Sentinels have become respected figures, Force users who help without dominating. Most people who remember Rey's empire firsthand are old themselves, and a new generation has grown up knowing it only as history. Ben is released from his sentence with a full pardon, free to go anywhere, do anything. Most people expect him to retire to some quiet world, to fade into obscurity. Instead, he approaches the Republic with a request. He wants to visit Rey. The response is complicated. Her exile was supposed to be permanent, but Ben argues that after 20 years, perhaps the sentence can be reconsidered. After debate, the Republic agrees to a single visit, with the understanding that both Ben and Rey will make a case for her potential return or continued exile. Ben travels to Rey's world in the same small ship Finn used years ago. When he lands and sees Rey, he almost doesn't recognize her. She's in her 50s now, hair gray, face lined, but there's a serenity about her that wasn't there before. She looks wise in a way that has nothing to do with power or knowledge, a wisdom that comes from acceptance and growth. They approach each other slowly, both hardly believing this moment is real. When they embrace, their Force bond, dormant for 2 decades, flares back to life. The connection is different now, mature, deep, free of the desperate intensity that characterized their earlier relationship. They're not the broken young people who fell in love amid chaos. They're survivors, changed by time and consequence, but still fundamentally connected. They spend weeks together, and Ben witnesses the life Rey has built. He sees her garden, her meditations, the cave with its mural and teachings. He reads what she's written, profound insights about the Force that integrate the best of Jedi and Sith philosophies while transcending both. He realizes that Rey has accomplished something extraordinary. She's become genuinely enlightened, achieving a balance that neither the old Jedi Order nor any Sith Lord ever managed. Her isolation, intended as punishment, became an opportunity for growth that wouldn't have been possible in the noise of galactic civilization. Ben asks if she wants to leave to return to the known galaxy. Rey admits she doesn't know. This world has become her home, her sanctuary. She's found peace here that she never had out there. But she also recognizes that her knowledge, her teachings, could help others avoid her mistakes. They discuss what Rey's return would mean. She couldn't resume any position of power, that's certain. But she could teach, quietly, perhaps working with Finn's academy or establishing a monastery for deep Force study. She could help heal some of the wounds her empire caused through direct amends and service, similar to what Ben has been doing. Or she could remain in exile by choice, content with her solitary enlightenment, trusting that her teachings carved in stone will eventually be discovered and shared. It's not a decision to make lightly, and Rey takes time to meditate on it. She consults the Force, reaching out to the spirits of Jedi past. Luke's Force ghost appears to her, something that hasn't happened in all her years of exile. He tells her that exile was never meant to be permanent punishment, but an opportunity for reflection and growth. She's done that work. The question now is what she wants her legacy to be. Rey makes her decision. She'll return, but not to teach or lead. She'll return to tell her story, to give testimony to the dangers of power and the possibility of redemption. She'll work with historians and philosophers, helping them understand her fall and recovery so that future generations can learn from it. She'll spend her remaining years in service, not grand heroic service, but humble, daily work helping ordinary people. She'll be available to Force sensitives who struggle with darkness, offering counsel from someone who fell as far as possible and found a way back. But she won't seek prominence or recognition. She'll live quietly, a living reminder that redemption is possible but doesn't erase consequences. Ben supports her decision and offers to work alongside her. They've been apart for 20 years, and however many years they have left, they'd like to spend them together, finally building that simple life they once dreamed about. The galaxy's reaction to Rey's return is mixed. Some view it as inappropriate, arguing that her crimes were too severe for any amount of reflection to justify release. Others see it as a powerful story of redemption and growth. The New Republic, after careful consideration, allows her return under conditions similar to Ben's original sentence. Supervised freedom with restrictions on her movements and activities. Rey accepts these conditions without protest. She returns to find a galaxy transformed, barely recognizable from the one she tried to rule. It's messier, more chaotic, but also more alive, more authentic. People are free to make mistakes, to argue, to govern themselves in diverse ways. It's everything her empire wasn't, and she sees the beauty in it. Understands finally that imposed order, no matter how well-intentioned, can never match the vitality of genuine freedom. Rey and Ben establish a small homestead on a quiet world. Neither Tatooine nor anywhere with historical significance, just an ordinary place with honest people. They work in the community, helping with whatever needs doing, farming, building, teaching youngsters to read. Most of their neighbors don't know who they really are, just that they're an odd older couple who occasionally do strange things with the Force and seem to carry deep sadness alongside deep peace. Occasionally, someone seeking Force guidance finds them, directed by Finn or the Sentinels. Rey teaches these seekers carefully, emphasizing humility, warning against the pride that led to her downfall, sharing her hard-earned wisdom. She never claims to have all the answers, presenting herself as a cautionary tale rather than an enlightened master. Finn visits them regularly, often bringing students from his academy to meet Rey and Ben, to hear their stories firsthand. It's a powerful teaching tool, showing young Force sensitives the real consequences of falling to darkness and the difficult, painful reality of redemption. Rey doesn't hide her crimes or soften her story. She describes the seductive logic that led her astray, the rationalizations she made, the pain she caused. She answers every question honestly, no matter how uncomfortable. When students ask if she regrets accepting Palpatine's offer, she says yes, absolutely. It was the worst decision of her life. But she also acknowledges that without falling so far, she never would have understood the Force as deeply as she now does. It's not that darkness was necessary, but that she's chosen to extract meaning from her mistakes rather than being destroyed by them. Ben shares his own journey, describing his years as Kylo Ren and his long penance. He emphasizes that redemption isn't a moment but a lifelong process, that you don't simply fix the damage you caused and move on. You carry your sins forever, and the question is whether you let them crush you or motivate you to do better. He's honest about the temptation to self-destruction, the times he wanted to give up, the ongoing struggle with self-hatred. But he also talks about finding purpose in service, about the small kindnesses that kept him going, about learning to forgive himself not because he deserves it, but because self-loathing doesn't help anyone. Together, Rey and Ben present a complex picture of redemption, neither romanticizing it nor declaring it impossible, but showing it as difficult, ongoing, and ultimately worthwhile. The Skywalker saga, many believe, ended when Rey refused to kill Palpatine, when Ben Solo died giving her his life, when the Sith were finally destroyed. But in this timeline, the saga continues differently. It becomes a story not about destroying evil, but about transforming it. Not about destiny and chosen ones, but about choices and consequences. Rey Palpatine's fall and redemption become legendary, studied by philosophers and Force scholars for generations. Some criticize her, arguing that her crimes were too severe for redemption to matter. Others hold her up as proof that no one is beyond saving, that darkness doesn't have the final word. The truth, as always, is complicated, existing somewhere between condemnation and absolution. In their final years, Rey and Ben become beloved fixtures in their small community. They're the wise old couple who tell incredible stories that sound like myths, who seem to understand the Force in ways that transcend standard teaching, who carry visible scars but also undeniable peace. When Rey finally dies, peacefully in old age, the galaxy mourns in complex ways. She's remembered as many things: tyrant and redeemed, empress and exile, Palpatine and something beyond that name. Her funeral is small, attended by close friends and students, held on the world where she spent her final years. Finn speaks, describing their friendship, her fall, and her long journey back. He emphasizes that Rey's story is a gift to the galaxy, a brutal, honest account of how good people can do terrible things, and how redemption, while never erasing the past, offers a path forward. Ben, now ancient, speaks briefly, simply saying that Rey taught him that love doesn't conquer darkness, but it provides a reason to fight through it. He dies peacefully a few months later, and they're buried together under twin trees they planted years ago, finally at rest. The galaxy Rey left behind continues evolving. The New Republic endures, learning from both its predecessors' mistakes and Rey's empire's failures. The Sentinels maintain balance, Force users who protect without dominating. Finn's legacy of accessible, humble Force training produces generations of balanced practitioners. And throughout it all, Rey's story is told, a complex tale without easy answers. She's a reminder that anyone can fall, that power corrupts in subtle ways, that the dark side offers tempting solutions to real problems. But she's also proof that falling isn't final, that redemption is possible even after terrible choices, that growth can occur even in exile and punishment. Her life becomes a teaching tool, a warning and an inspiration simultaneously. The question of whether the galaxy was better or worse for Rey joining Palpatine remains debated. In one sense, immeasurable suffering resulted from her empire, systems oppressed, lives destroyed, freedoms crushed. In another sense, her fall and redemption provided lessons that might prevent future darkness, insights into the Force that enriched galactic understanding, and a powerful story of hope for anyone struggling with their worst impulses. Perhaps the answer is that it was both, simultaneously terrible and ultimately meaningful. A tragedy that became a lesson, a fall that enabled unprecedented understanding of redemption. The Force, after all, works in mysterious ways, creating balance not through simple victory of good over evil, but through complex cycles of falling and rising, of learning and growth. So what if Rey joined Palpatine in the rise of Skywalker? The galaxy would have faced a new Sith empire, powerful and ruthless yet strangely idealistic. It would have suffered under authoritarian rule, even as some systems benefited from Rey's genuine desire to help. It would have witnessed the resistance struggling to fight someone they loved, grappling with impossible moral questions. It would have seen Rey wrestle with the dark side, fall deeper into corruption, and ultimately claw her way back to the light through painful self-realization. It would have watched Ben Solo die and return, spending decades in penance, finding meaning in service rather than power. It would have experienced a slower, messier end to the Skywalker saga, one without clear victory, but with deeper understanding of redemption, consequence, and the ongoing struggle between freedom and control. This alternate timeline suggests that perhaps the most important battles aren't fought with lightsabers, but within ourselves. That the greatest victories aren't military conquests, but psychological triumphs over our worst impulses. Rey's acceptance of Palpatine's offer would have led to immediate catastrophe but eventual enlightenment, personal damnation but galactic education. It would have extended the Skywalker story beyond neat resolution into messier, more human territory, exploring questions the original trilogy only touched on. Can someone who falls to darkness truly return? What does redemption look like in practice? How do you live with irreversible consequences of terrible choices? These questions, uncomfortable and complex, would define the legacy of Empress Rey Palpatine, the woman who ruled the galaxy and lost her soul, then spent the rest of her life learning to be simply fully human. The Force, balanced not through destruction of darkness but through understanding and transformation. The Skywalker saga concluded not with heroic sacrifice but with difficult growth. Rey Palpatine remembered not as a conqueror or a savior, but as someone who fell, rose, and spent her life helping others learn from her mistakes. This is the alternate history, the question asked and answered, the path not taken in the original story, but explored here in all its painful, hopeful, complex reality. What if Rey joined Palpatine? The galaxy would have suffered and learned, fallen and risen, and ultimately emerged different, but perhaps wiser, carrying forward the knowledge that redemption is always possible even if it's never easy, that no one is beyond saving even if saving doesn't erase the past, that the greatest power isn't domination, but the courage to admit you were wrong and spend the rest of your life trying to make it right.